I would just say this: opposition is not a constant, it's dynamic. Invite these communities in to participate in the design of these projects. Magic happens when you invite them in, even the opposition, and really inviting them in so that these projects aren't something that are just helicoptering in and happening to them, but so that they have agency of some sort, that they feel it, that they're being heard and listened to and responded to.
And this is Scaling Clean, the podcast for clean economy CEOs, investors, and the people who advise them. I'm your host, Melissa Baldwin. Each show, we bring you usable insights from tested leaders that you can apply to the business of running your business. Buy-in from local communities can make or break an energy project. Across the country, developers are encountering social and political opposition. Misinformation can block permitting and empower organized resistance online. My guest today is Eli Andrews. He's the CEO and co-founder of civicIQ, a nonprofit with a new model for local community engagement. civicIQ helps developers gauge community sentiment, counter misinformation, and build genuine local support long before clean energy projects reach a planning board. Eli, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Melissa. It is great to be here.
We're glad to have you. I think this is such a fascinating topic, and I'm excited to dive into this work with you. First, I want to start by just having you tell us about your company. Tell us about civicIQ and what you do there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything we do, Melissa, starts with listening. And I think that's likely one of the differentiators in the space is our first job whenever we're going into a community is to listen to what people have to say. And we do that a lot of different ways, but all digitally, all on SMS and email and social media. And based on what people are telling us, it helps us share with the broader stakeholders, for a renewable energy development, what that community might want or need or not want in terms of developing utility scale renewable energy. So that's what we do. And sometimes that is in the flavor of going out with some like CapEx-friendly questions to the community for input on, like, so, hey, there's this proposed solar farm in your community. If you could choose between the following, like planting some pollinator grasses underneath the panels, or increasing the buffer zone for on the property line, between the property line and the panels, or solar grazing, things like that, what would you prefer? And what we found is that when we go out asking questions like that, not only do we provide education in the form of the questions themselves, but the community feels invited into the process. And so it kind of just reframes the entire conversation beyond, do you support, are you against?
I want to ask you, what makes this model different than, say, like traditional polling that a developer might do when they go into a community? How is this approach different?
It's a great question. These are conversations. They're not static one-off surveys. So there are surveys within what we do, but the conversations we have with folks develops over time. And so in that way also we're able to, when we're listening to what people say in the community, for example, and there are really clear trends of misinformation about a particular issue, for example, maybe that solar panels cause cancer or something like that. We then, if it's appropriate and in partnership with our stakeholders, we will go out and provide just high quality facts and information to try to reground communities in a shared set of facts. So it's not only listening, it's really a two-way conversation that takes place over time.
And I'm curious too, I want to understand the messenger, right? I know that the message matters, but the messenger matters as well. So when you go in and have these conversations, who is the messenger?
We've had the great fortune of being able to read incredible research that's been done on this, some of it by your firm, others by partners we work with, like Rural Climate Partnership. where they're really listening to people and looking to understand the kinds of personas and people that they listen to in their community. So, of course, farmers and ranchers, and veterans, and school superintendents and people like that are really important as messengers. And so one of our approaches when we go out with a story that is meant to combat misinformation, one of the ways that we do that is we don't say, hey, this is the truth. We go out and have someone tell their story. So we're not telling, our stories, civicIQ, or one of our brands, but it's actually bringing that rancher or that veteran, and interviewing them and telling their story either in images and text or in video.
One of the things I always like to ask our guests is, hey, you're a CEO now. How did you get to where you are today? What was that journey for you?
I am a founder by nature. It's in my, I swear it's like wired into my genetic code or something. I look out in the world and I see things that can be fixed, and I want to build an organization around a solution, or I see a gap and I want to create a solution for it and create value. And for me, that's always, mission driven. That's just my orientation. But that part of my journey to becoming a CEO is innate. However, I actually had to learn how to become a strategic leader. That was a disciplined effort and involved a whole bunch of mentors and a whole bunch of study and a whole bunch of practice and a whole bunch of making mistakes. So I really, in that sense, I learned how to be a CEO. I think I'm a founder by nature and a CEO by discipline and by study. Just for some examples of what I mean by that, when I was a young CEO, I thought it was really important to surround myself with people who are really loyal to me. And I had to learn that it is so much more valuable to be surrounded by multiple perspectives and people who are ready and willing and able to speak up, because steel sharpens steel. And so that was learned, that was not innate, as with so many other aspects of that.
You mentioned mentors. Can you recall any specific mentors and anything that they taught you that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I'm really excited to actually share about one of those mentors, because that's who was on my mind when I was saying that. His name is Al Basiri. He actually is a retired professor at Penn State, and he taught this capstone course in strategic leadership. And I was tapped a few years back at Penn State to bring sustainability as an approach to strategic leadership and actually take over his class. And I wasn't sure at the time, but the first thing I did was I said, hey, could I take your class before I agree to that? And so I took Al's class, and my goodness, it was one of the most humbling things I ever did. I had to kind of slowly let go of so many things that I know or think I know about strategy and leadership, and just immerse myself in someone who had dedicated their whole life to the discipline of understanding this. And so I had the great fortune to take his class and then agree to step in and bring some of the learnings from our industry, from the clean energy industry, into that graduate course. And it's just so wonderful. Right now, that course is a blend of everything that is the legacy that Al gave me, along with insights from our work on the clean energy transition.
You mentioned you had to unlearn things. Can you think of something specific that kind of got flipped on its head for you?
Oh yeah, totally. So first of all, my instinctually, when there is a problem, when there's a fire burning, I want to just tactically dive in and go solve it and go fix it. And then the problem, of course, when that's your instinct, is that by the time you're halfway done putting out one fire, another one pops up over here and over there and over there. And so one of the things I learned is that even within the heat of tactical firefighting, just how to pause, lift my head up, scan the horizon, understand where we're going, align team, make sure we're clear on goals before jumping back in, and then ideally not jumping back into that tactical mode.
You made a great point about tactical firefighting and what your mentor taught you there. I'm curious, that course that you mentioned, is that available to the public, or is that only for grad students?
It's a good question. A lot of people take it. The course that I'm teaching now is called BA 865. You can go find it on Penn State. It's the capstone course in a program, a master's program called the Strategic Management and Executive Leadership. But other people enroll in it, like certificates, so it may be available just as a one-off.
All right, so let's pretend that a time machine is invented and you can go back in time and to the point where you started this company. What advice would you give your younger self?
Push power outward and downward. I mean, like, harness wisdom from everywhere on your team, and especially don't become a problem solver, because as much as, and this was hard for me because my nature is to see a problem and want to go fix it, and so there's so many problems with that as a leader. Like when you do that, you actually disempower your team, you actually create a dependency on yourself as a problem solver, and then that, of course, prevents you from doing the work that is critical, which is that strategic leadership perspective of stepping back and building the business for the future, and analyzing where things are at. And it leads the team to become stronger, because if you don't let people succeed on their own and fail on their own and do it over and over, you're actually taking away an opportunity for them to learn and grow. And so that's why it's counterintuitive, but it's one of those simple counterintuitive things that make so much sense, and that require us to step back and just intentionally implement the practice.
So you mentioned social trends just now. I want to talk more about that. I want to talk about community engagement and specifically how attitudes towards renewables have changed in recent years. So you've been following this closely. What have you noticed in some of the data and the conversations that you're looking at?
The easiest one to point out is just pre and post presidential election in 2024, in this current administration. There was a marked shift in what people were talking about, and also so we do quantitative analysis too of like the percent of people who support or oppose or on the fence to solar, wind, battery storage in a given place. That percentage of opposition increased dramatically between pre-November 2024 and post-November 2024, and interestingly, perhaps not surprisingly, many of the things that are shared and spoken and repeated by people are repeating, what our president says. And unfortunately, much of that is misinformation. And so the prevalence of misinformation has increased. And I don't know that that's the cause, but I see the verbatim responses from people. And so that has changed. And then, of course, along with some of the policies around that, although even if the policies aren't necessarily impacting the local development as much as many people think, the narrative is, and the dialogue and the things that people are talking about are very much impacted by those by the national noise, is what I would call it. I think what we do in our work in the siting and communication sphere is really about signal, and really about connecting with people and understanding, communicating value. But the noise broke through, that was what I would say, in 2024, 2025. And it impacted both the kind of how much support there was in a given community, and what people were talking about, and what kinds of misinformation is trending as well.
On that topic, what are the most common misconceptions that you see out there driving opposition?
I'll share what's the most common one that I think is the most challenging one as well, because it's rooted partially in misinformation, but it's more just rooted in conservative and rural values. And that's the sense that people have that they're giving up farmland to make way for utility scale solar and wind and battery storage. And that one, I think, is the most important one to focus on, because it's really authentic. Its core is on genuine concern that people have about their way of life, about their identity, about the place they live, about how the place they live looks, about how their dad and mom and grandma grew up, and it's about those things which are very real And so that one to me is the most important one. One, because it's the most prevalent point of opposition that we find when we're listening to people. And two, because a lot of times what we find is that part of the reason that people have that sense is that they haven't been exposed to things like pollinator grasses planted underneath the solar arrays. So something like that, even just as simple as an image or a short video of that, can actually just show people how farmland and utility scale solar can coexist at the same time. For us, that starts with listening and then asking people these questions that are, questions that educate at the same time. Like, what if we were to plant this, and this is what it looks like, plant the pollinator grasses, and we found, and then we get someone, you talked about messengers. A messenger for that one I like is the neighboring farmer whose crop yields increased because those pollinators were planted underneath. So it's about the community and creating this like ecosystem around utility scale, solar, wind, battery storage, creating an ecosystem so that for me, and this is what inspires me, this vision of this industry as this force that comes in, this transformative force that can come in and create new value and re-enrich the soil and increase crop yields and bring money into these communities, both in community benefit agreements and in, like I said, the crop yields and the jobs and all of those pieces. So that as a transformative force, when it's done well and when it's done right. And of course, it's not always done well and right, which is a challenge that we need to work on as communicators with the industry, with the developers as well, because they want to do it right. Sometimes they just don't know how.
Yeah. And especially with agrivoltaics, as I understand it, not every site is ideal for, sheep or grazing or pollinator gardens. But we've noticed the same trend that you talked about, that what this feeling that a part of their identity is at risk in giving up this farmland. And we also notice the same thing, that in communicating that these two things can coexist, you can move the needle a little bit. I guess my question for you is, do you see the needle move when you do that, when you show them the images, or can you say a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah. When it comes to things like that, we don't guess about the needle. We go out and test rigorously. So when I mentioned a 5-second video of pollinator grasses under solar arrays, I mentioned that because that is an experiment that we ran very intentionally with super rigorous data analytics with a control group and a treatment group. So what we were testing there is, does this image change how people respond to the statement? To what degree do you agree with the statement that farmland and solar panels are incompatible, right? So along that scale, we showed people this video and a whole bunch of others, right? And then some people none, and that particular video literally moved the needle.
Nice. Nice. Is there anything that was really surprising that you found when you were listening to these communities, or anything surprising that you learned from your research?
I'm going to share something that I find very surprising, and it's actually impacting how we're thinking about what we call narrative regrounding, and it's going to get us into a discussion about artificial intelligence. But so the research that I found just so kind of shocking and delighting in a way was some research that I came across out of MIT and a number of other American universities. This was about conspiracy theories. And what they did is they recruited a whole bunch of people who were entrenched in a broad range of conspiracy theories. I mean, like from flat earthers to, COVID vaccine conspiracy theories, a whole big broad range. What they did is they had these people sit in dialogue with a large language model, with basically a version of ChatGPT. And they found that through sustained, pretty short but sustained conversation, about 20% of people who were entrenched in conspiracy theories got disentangled from them. That rate, 20%, I found just phenomenal. I mean, we work really hard to move the needle 20% on anything we do, as you know, Melissa. So what we did is we went and started building artificial intelligence agents that were fully trained on a very narrow knowledge base. So they were trained up on a very narrow knowledge base about clean energy and about facts. And every single fact was sourced with something very trustworthy and recognizable by people. So like USA Today article or something like that. So we meticulously created a knowledge base and built an agent around it to go and interact with people because I was curious. Could we do the same thing for misinformation about wind and solar and battery storage? And the short answer is that we can. And we're still trying to understand why that is. But people engaging with kind of a disembodied machine who just kind of has facts but is still conversational seems to be more impactful than person-to-person conversations in this particular context when people are rooted in misinformation or conspiracy theories. And so we are right now engaging folks, particularly the opposition, people who are opposed and engaged in some kind of misinformation about wind, solar, battery storage, to have a conversation and draw their own conclusions. And I'll just say that the initial results are promising. And our approach to this is not persuasion. We're not trying to persuade anyone or convince anyone of anything. Our approach to this is something we call narrative regrounding. The idea is simply like, what if we could simply reground some communities, perhaps even our country, Melissa, in a shared set of facts about something that matters. So that's what we're excited to explore. We're still testing this. Like anything, we're not going to bring this, out of the lab until we know. And we're also very transparent with people. The first thing it says is, I'm an AI agent and I'm gonna have a conversation with you. It sounds like you think about this. So it's very conversational, but it's very transparent that people are talking to an AI agent.
I'll be curious as you do this research to see if you get a solid direction on the types of credible, trustworthy messengers that perform the best in this work. Like, is it the USA Today article? Is it a professor at this university? Is there a local university connection that matters more? And so I'd be really excited to learn more about that when you have the information. Excellent. Well, good. So we talked a little bit about AI. I want to continue that conversation in a new light, though. We want to talk about marketing communications, this is what we do at TigerCom. We're marketing communications and PR. But my question for you is, what is your civicIQ's toughest marketing communication challenge that you're facing right now?
Well, I'll give you two answers to that. One is an answer that I'm really excited about because we're in the early stages of working with a new client, and this is a new client in a totally different space, and that space is carbon capture and storage. And it turns out that they have many of the same challenges and concerns, not identical, but many of the same challenges and concerns that we have with solar and wind and battery storage, in that it's community opposition that is shutting them down. So that, I would say, is a marketing challenge. And I don't know what the story is there.
No, that's a great, great question. I think it really does depend on the company, the community, the location, their history, whether they've been doing there before, what is their knowledge of this, is there any economic benefit that it's
Yeah.
bringing? So,
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the second marketing challenge is a little closer to home. What we do at civicIQ is it's so geeked out. It's so rooted in data and data analytics and all of this stuff. And I love all the data and stuff. I find sometimes that actually just having this crisp, concise, kind of like marketing friendly version of what we do is a constant challenge I'm thinking about, because I don't want to make it seem, less nuanced and complex than it is. But I also want to really communicate what the value is in a way that people understand that what we do is very different than traditional surveying, and it's very different than traditional comms. And we we segment our audiences, so we never send the same message to any group. We've got our supporters, we've got our opposition, we've got on the fence, and we've got different gradations within there. And depending on where you are, you get a unique message and experience with us. So it's complicated in some ways. On the other sense, it's simple. So that, I would say, is another marketing challenge that's occupying my mind these days. Is how do we communicate about that unique value in a way that shows how simple and powerful it is, and without throwing under the bus how it's rooted in nuanced and complex data.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. My top of the line response for you would be one of the things that I noticed. I recently did an audit of the top 100 clean tech companies, and I was looking at them for actually to see what AI knows about them, because SEO is being replaced by AI search
Yeah.
in a big way and quickly. And for these large language models, when they go out and do their training, they create a memory. And so the memory is static, it doesn't change. And it's only when you tell AI to do a live search that it will find differentiators for your company. And one of the things I noticed in this research was that a lot of companies are so obscure in using buzzwords to describe themselves that it's really hard for people and for machines to differentiate who they are. Like, every company in the energy transition is, pursuing a clean energy transition. Everybody is, bringing power to people who need it. And so my advice is to be really specific if you can. And the other piece of advice is to who you are, what you do, how you're different. Those are the key, pillars of your key messaging. But not being afraid to quantify with data that difference in something that is specific and measurable. That's another really helpful way that companies can stand out from the crowd. Use specific data, but also tell a story. That's the other way that we see that people can really connect. So I want to continue here. The next section of our interview is on learning and development. You mentioned the professor that was your mentor, but are there any books or podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, yeah. If anyone hasn't come across Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire by Rebecca Henderson, masterful. Many stories and examples of incredible transformations. We're talking like transformations like how Danish oil and natural gas became Ørsted. And not all, of course, about clean energy, but just great research, chock full of stories about companies who have reimagined what it means to do business and how to do business and how to replace old moving systems with newer technology and better ways forward that don't kind of destroy our world and our capacity to thrive in it along the way. So it's just a masterful collection of stories about that. In terms of a podcast, so I am in and from the very early days and pre-chat GPT have been a student of artificial intelligence, and I believe that we are on the brink of industrial revolution scale change in a much shorter time frame. There's a podcast that has an overview of kind of the history of the development of artificial intelligence. It's called The Last Invention. It's by Longview Media. It is, I think it's a must listen for anyone who hasn't had the chance to be exposed to kind of the history of how artificial intelligence developed, and then the recent history of the breakthroughs that have led to where we're at now. And it's great because their messengers in this are the people who built it, including their new concerns now that it's actually working, and so it's, I think it only has about 7 or 8 episodes, but it's just phenomenal for anyone who wants to kind of hear that history and see what we might be on the brink of.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you, Eli.
Yeah.
My next question, this is a simple question. Do you think that success relies upon what a company chooses to do or what they choose not to do?
I believe that success, particularly within a strategic leadership framework, is the challenge of maintaining the current business that we have while building the business of the future, and how much attention to give to doing things the way they are and to keeping the lights on now, and how much attention to give to the business of the future that we know we're going to have to build in order to remain relevant as the world changes. Because if you just keep doing what you've always been doing, sooner or later you're going to, become extinct, because the world's going to change without you. So as a leader, just navigating the tension between those two points to how to keep the current business going while building the business of the future.
What about performance and well-being? Is there anything that you do in work or in your personal life to maintain your ability to perform as a CEO on a daily basis?
I do. I probably about 3 to 4 days a week, when the world doesn't interfere in other ways. I get up at 5 in the morning, and before I even look at a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, I go down and put on a weight vest and do a super intense, 20 to 30 minute workout. And then I have a kind of contemplative time of reflection, prayer. And then I read, I study, I go find a new book, I go find a new podcast. And then I do my most important strategic work. And when I do that, which is many days of the week, I've gotten the things that I care most about done way before my first call ever starts. Because once my calls start, it's kind of too late.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then we're all, in the weeds, as we have to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also have such a robust family life. I have a 15-year-old daughter who I adore, and my wife. And so I stop working for the most part, by 5.
Good
p.m.
for you. Yeah.
So there's, sometimes there's things I have to deal with, but I am pretty good about that.
My final question, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't talked about already?
I would just say this: opposition is not a constant. It's dynamic. And the same advice I gave to myself of pushing power outward and downward and harnessing insights from everywhere, I believe applies in this context. And the way I mean that, invite these communities in to participate in the design of these projects. Magic happens when you invite them in, even the opposition, and really inviting them in so that these projects aren't something that are just helicoptering in and happening to them, but so that they have agency of some sort, that they feel it, that they're being heard and listened to and responded to, especially on the design and early side of it.
Oh, that's a great point, Eli. And I'm going to play pretend that I'm a skeptical developer and ask you the question like, hey, but wouldn't that cost too much? Or is it impossible to make them happy? Like, what is your response to a developer who's heard this, but maybe they don't think it's realistic or achievable to do what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I'd say just you're really strategic about the way you do that in CapEx-friendly ways. Like, you don't go and promise to only build on rooftops and things that can't be done. You go out and do things that you can do. Like, it's an area where you can plant pollinator grasses, and that you have budget, in this project to be able to do that. So it's very strategic as well. It's not an open-ended, yes, you ask open-ended questions, but you combine that, and that's why it requires partnership with developers as well to know what can be done, what there is budget for, and then invite the input in on, CapEx-friendly design changes that can benefit from community input.
Terrific. This has been so fun, Eli. I've really enjoyed getting to know you better and learning about your technology. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Scaling Clean, the podcast for clean economy CEOs, investors, and the people who advise them. I'm your host, Melissa Baldwin. Our producer is Claire Quirin. If you like what you hear on Scaling Clean episodes, we'd appreciate it if you'd give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment where you get your podcast. And until next time, we wish you all the best in the clean economy transition.